Have you ever thought of buying a franchise or currently own one or many? If so, this podcast is for you. Welcome to Franchise Euphoria, the podcast created and hosted by franchise attorney Josh Brown for the sole purpose of helping people find success through franchising.
Hello and welcome to another episode of Franchise Euphoria. Today I am thrilled to have Michael O'Neill on the show. Michael is the founder and host of the wildly popular Solopreneur Hour podcast, where he helps people considering the entrepreneur lifestyle and those that have already experienced it and can never turn back. So if you are listening and you are at a point in your life where you are trying to decide your next move and what that should be, or you've already decided and are looking for guidance on clearly identifying your unique attributes and where your place is in the wild world of entrepreneurship, definitely stay tuned in. We will talk about this and much, much more. Without further ado, hello, Michael, and welcome to the show.
Josh, thanks so much for having me, man. It's really cool to be here.
Well, it really is great to have you. And I told you sort of off air, I'm a big fan of your podcast, the Solopreneur Hour. I can't remember if I stumbled across it just by, searching and through Stitcher or one of the platforms, or if somebody had recommended it. But I've listened to quite a bit of them and listened for a long time. And I love your style. I love what you're doing. I love your story. And I think that's sort of a great point to jump off of before we dive in to more of the details. Tell us a little bit about you and your journey and sort of how you got to where you are today.
You know how much I love that question, Josh.
I know.
Really. Which part of my journey would you
Well,
like?
here's what I think that obviously everybody has a story. Everybody has a history. And the real reason why I like to ask that question, and actually I'm curious why you hate that question, but I like that question because for a lot of people listening, there's always a story, and people think that when they listen to somebody who has maybe found where they want to go or found what they want to do, they always forget that it was a process to get there, that there's a backstory. And so sometimes I think hearing somebody's history, sometimes hearing about where they started to where they got now, even though it's a long and winding journey in most instances, can be quite helpful.
No, I agree. I think you're 100% accurate about that. The thing is, like you said, everybody has a story. So this is coming purely from a podcast training perspective is why I don't love that question. And here's what I mean is that I could say the same thing to you, but I don't know your audience. Only you know your audience. So when someone starts a conversation with that, well, tell us a bit about yourself. I've got 10 ways I can go with that. I can talk about my growing up as a musician, or as an athlete, as I can talk about a major thing that happened in my family. I can talk about like a network marketing side or a social media training side. So I have a million ways I could go with that. And without being specific about what we're asking about, what it does as interviewers is it hands over the control to the guest. I'll go do 15 minutes on something. You're going to go, oh, wait, that's not what I meant. I was hoping he would go this way. So when it comes to sort of interviewing, and that's why I don't like that particular question, now I know what you're getting at, but and I'm thinking, at least I think I know what you're getting at. Are you asking about how I had this sort of tragedy in my family and then I had to kind of rebuild from there? Is that where you're getting at?
Well, I mean, not specifically. I mean, that's part of the story. There you go.
My point. Yeah, that's my point.
So well, it's funny. Well, let me
my background you like to hear about.
Well, let me tell you. I'll tell you which part. And I don't really. There's not really a specific part. I mean, I know about the family tragedy, and now that we've mentioned it, of course, you have to talk about it. But it's funny that you mentioned that about, you lose control. as the interviewer. But part of it, for me, which was just sort of fascinating, and a little bit later, I want to talk a little bit more about Michael Gerber, but I bring him up right now because when I interviewed him a while back, I had a list of, 3 pages of questions, and I'm going, man, I've been wanting to interview this guy for a long time. And one of the first questions I asked him was real general like that. And it led us down this path of really getting into a whole area in a conversation that I had never anticipated, but what came to be a fascinating interview. And sort of an interview where it was like, wow, I've never heard him talk about stuff like this in any other interview, and really diving into the psychology of the entrepreneur and stuff like that. And so it's those sort of things where it's like, yeah, I agree with you. I do lose control a little bit at that point, but it's also kind of fun because you don't know exactly where
your foot on the accelerator and go.
Yeah, exactly. Just kind of go with the flow. No, actually, what I really getting to the specifics of that, I mean, I think it'd be really beneficial to, talk about you obviously you love music. I know that just from listening, and some people who aren't familiar with the podcast may not know that. You've got a musical background. You've got a sports background. You've got all these aspects of your life. Did you always know that you were an entrepreneur? Did you always know that you were driven in that direction?
I think when I was a kid, and a couple things happened. One, I remember telling my mom I wanted to buy something. I think it was this is dating myself, but I think it was like a new Walkman. It was the good one. It was the good metal one that was like really super fancy. And it was just a little bit bigger than your tape. And it was, at the time, I want to say it was like $220 or something like that. And I remember getting up in the morning. It was snowy. I lived outside of Philadelphia, and I told my mom, I said, I want that Walkman. I want to go get it tonight or later today. And she goes, well, you don't have enough money for it. I'm like, I will. I'm going to make the money by the end of the day. And I literally went door to door knocking on, I knocked on everybody's door and said, can I shovel your driveway? And I did it for $10 a driveway or $20 or whatever it was. And I had made enough for the Walkman by like noon. I worked my butt off. But then it's 2 or 3 o'clock. I said, Mom, let's go. I'm good. Let's go get it. She was like, all right, you sure you want to spend your money on that? I'm like, yes. And I got it. I was so excited about it. And I took it to school the next day, and I dropped it and shattered it in a million pieces. True story. But point of it is that I was never I had a guy that my dad was, he grew up in the South. He literally picked cotton when he was a kid. So I grew up picking rocks out of the yard, and I just had a lot of sort of, I think, work. I just figured that you had to work to do anything. Had a paper route when I was a kid, had a magazine route when I was a kid, so that was all there. And then I had thought anyway that I was doing the right thing by going to school and going to college, and then coming out and getting into the world, and I was going to be a designer and a web guy. And I got out and started doing design and web and print and stuff like that. And it took about, I was all right for a while. And then I realized somewhere down the road that I became unemployable. And that was only because I started reading too much. I started reading Michael Gerber, and I read Robert Kiyosaki and Tim Ferriss and things like that, and realized that there was no way I could go and punch the clock anymore. And that's sort of what got me on this journey of being a solopreneur.
Well, and I mean, I think that's a great jumping off point in terms of what you mean by unemployable. I mean, your tagline for your podcast, the Solopreneur Hour, is job security for the unemployable. And I love that tagline. I really do. When I first heard it, I thought that's pretty brilliant. But can you explain how you came up with it and what it really means to you?
Yeah, I mean, if to me, I'm proudly unemployable, and I think that people that are in careers where they're solopreneurs and they do it for long enough, they realize there's no real way that you can go and punch the clock for some middle manager that knows less than you do. And what happens is, I think there are specific steps you can take to becoming a solopreneur if you have like a regular 9-to-5 job. And if you start going down that road and start exposing yourself to these people that are that are really successful and they're on their own and they have time freedom and hopefully they have some financial freedom as well, it's almost like you can't go back from it. It's like you've taken the blue pill at this point and you sort of see this thing through, because once I always say it's for those people that know too much. And a solopreneur to me is someone that is, an entrepreneur is trying to build a company. As a solopreneur is really just trying to build a life of time and financial freedom. And if you start reading these books and you go down this road, start really surrounding yourself with these people, it is very, very difficult to go and be employed somewhere anymore. So you thus become unemployable. And once you've done that and you've gone down that road and you've started seeing some success, so maybe you build a product online or an information product, or you start making passive income one way or the other, you then realize that being unemployable is the best way to be. And you become proudly unemployable, which is what my whole brand is about.
Well, I think it really resonated with me because when I first heard it and when I started listening to your podcast, I thought, yeah, that's exactly the feeling I had, when I decided to launch out on my own. I mean, forever I'd worked for other people. I'd worked in, the confines of other law firms, even when I had all my own clients, but was still working in that environment and was never fully satisfied. And it's just one of those things where, I think now looking back, I can connect the dots a little bit better. But the idea back then was, what else are you going to do? I didn't, unlike you, I didn't really grow up thinking I was going to be an entrepreneur or really even identifying that mark. But there was something, as I look back at the history in terms of where I've worked, what I've done, and those kinds of things, where there's always the makings of it at every stop. You know what I mean? And I think that's a big part of, being unemployable. And then I finally just got to the point where I felt like I can't do this anymore. I mean, somebody asked me, they said, when did you finally decide that, you were going to go out on your own? And I said, there came a point when the stress and just the struggle of having to go work in the environment I was in was more stressful than the thought of me taking the leap and going out on my own. And That's when I sort of felt like, okay, I'm fully unemployable.
Well, the thing is, one thing keyed me there, which was this is a choice. I mean, you sort of make this choice. You can either fall into it because a lot of people in sales travel so much that they get so worn down that they're like, I have to do something else. Or you get into the situation where you're in a bad work environment, you have people around you that are dragging you down, and you're like, I can't do this anymore. What do I do? Or you can make the conscious choice of, okay, I want to go down this road. And this is the thing where it takes, all this, you prepare for years to get lucky once. So that quote unquote luck factor happens because you do start reading the books and you do start surrounding yourself with the people, and then you're sort of on the road of unemployability.
Well, yeah, and it's you touched upon it, a couple minutes ago, where you were saying that you're not looking to build a huge company, which you would align more with being an entrepreneur as opposed to a solopreneur. It kind of reminded me, I think it was Seth Godin who likes to talk about the difference between a freelancer and an entrepreneur, and saying that everybody at the start of whatever they're creating needs to make that decision. Are you going to be a freelancer, which he would define, I think, in line with a solopreneur, where in other words, you're not trying to build a big company. You're trying to build more of a lifestyle business where you're out there, you're putting out a product, you're doing things, and maybe you have independent contractors that work for you, or you have VAs, or you have people who help you on a project by project basis, but you're not looking to build a big, huge company. And, it's kind of interesting to me because I think there's certain personalities that play into each aspect. I mean, there's certain people who maybe were more meant to be the entrepreneur that builds the big legacy style business, versus a lot of people now, and I'm sure in the past, are more just in line with the whole freelance solopreneur avenue. But how do you really know where you fall?
Because I think if you still want to work with clients, that's one of the big differentiating factors. If you're a freelancer, you're actively seeking clients to fill your schedule. If you're a solopreneur or unemployable, you are doing everything you can to not have to service clients. That's as simple as I can make it. It's a mind shift that, well, I'll give you an example. So when I was a designer, I was a web guy, designer, and branding guy and stuff for many years. And my old business model was me hustling, just me getting referrals and me building websites for people and doing business cards and brand identities and things like that. That's what I would do. Towards the end of it, I would get I would do that to fill my schedule. So I would be really super busy, and I would try to be making some money. So towards the end, I realized that once I've read some of the books, that I was trading so much time for money. It's all I was doing. Just because I was busy and I was making like a little bit of money, that didn't mean I was living any kind of good life. I'd go to work when it was dark and get home when it was dark. And my dog was like, "Really, dude?" So I had to figure something out. And what I started doing was I would go and I'd still be the sort of the face, if you will, of the company. I would go to a client. I would get everything I need. We'd fill out a creative brief and a scope document for whatever the project was. I would get them to sign off on those documents. So now I knew exactly what the project was. Then I would post that project to Odesk or to Elance, and I would get bids for it from all over the world. Someone would come back and say, "Okay, I can do that whole thing for $400. I'd say, "Great, thanks." Go back to the client and say, "Okay, this will be $4,000. And they'd say, "Great, sounds awesome." And I would hand the project off. I'd be a project manager. I would work 8 days on it. It would take me a quarter of the time, and I would net, $3,600 for about 8 hours of work instead of $4,000 for 100 hours of work or whatever I was doing before. And that was a big shift for me to realize that there's a better way to do even client servicing. There's a better way to do it.
Well, and I think a lot of times, clients want that too, right? In terms of, I just look at it from my perspective in the legal industry. The tried and true model has always been trading time for dollars. I'm definitely going away from that model, but it's a challenge because that's how everybody relates to the legal industry. But you're exactly right. When you trade time for dollars, there's only a certain amount of time in a day. There's only a certain amount of time that you can capture. And at that point in time, the only way to scale it is to add more people. And the only way to really remain small and still scale is to figure out a way to essentially not customize everything, right? You have to sort of have something that you can put together, put the time in, create something, and then it can be utilized on a larger scale.
Yeah, that's very correct. And something you just said, I believe that we don't even maximize the time that we have, much less trying to fill it up with other stuff. When everyone's like, "Oh, I'm so busy. And I'm like, "Man, you had the same 24 hours as Einstein and Da Vinci." And somehow we've not created that much. So there's got to be a better use of our time than what we're doing now.
So do you help people with that as well? Do you help people with time management, with efficiency and all that?
Yeah. If you look at the 4-hour work week, all Tim Ferriss is he's an efficiency expert. That's what he is. He's all about the 80-20 rule. That's all he really, when you look at all of his different trainings and what he does, he tries to get you most of the way there in the least possible amount of time. That's almost every single thing he talks about. So I find in my regular everyday life, I do the same thing. I'm a very efficient person, which can be irritating, not only to me, but to the rest of the world around me when I see people doing things in ways that I'm like, "Oh God, if you just did this in this order, it would totally be better." But okay. But that's so you got to bite your tongue a bit. But my coaching clients, I try to help them in I suppose what I would consider a very holistic way. I think it's what made me a decent designer and branding guy is that I could look at it from a, I forgive me for this, but I just had this conversation. I just interviewed a branding guy on the show. When you talk about brand, and this relates to what we're talking about, is a good branding person has a background in they know history, they know pop culture, they know design, they know all of these different facets that make a brand, which is not a logo, right? It's a promise. So when we talk about efficiency, it's being able to know this sort of scope and scale of everyday life and how things kind of fit together. And I think just a certain kind of person can see that as for what it is. Again, sort of to reference the Matrix, you can sort of see the Matrix, and then start batching these processes together. And I wouldn't call myself by any means like the most efficient batched process guy, but as I get busier with my podcast, which is getting more and more downloads every month, it's forcing me into doing things. It's forcing me into batching and outsourcing, which is a good problem to have, but it's some growing pains.
No, it's a great problem to have, and you're exactly right. I mean, I'm finding the same thing with mine. I mean, when I first started it, I was actually outsourcing my podcast in terms of I would do the interviews, and then I'd turn them into an MP3, and then Jamie Tardy had a company called Duncast. I don't know if you know about that company or knew about it, but she had a company that would convert and set up your illustration, set up everything, your blog, get the intro and outro, and do the artwork for the podcast and everything. And that was the way that I got started, because I just found, wow, if I wait for myself to have the time to do this, it's going to be never. And I had been wanting to launch a podcast for a couple years. And then after a while, I found out, well, okay, I can sort of bring this in-house. And then I trained one of my assistants to do it. But if I didn't have the help to do it, it would be incredibly difficult to do it in a consistent way. And especially as you start getting more and more downloads and getting more and more people interested in it and contacting you and those sorts of things, I mean, it just sort of compounds itself. So yeah, I agree with you. It's completely necessary to do that. And it's smart to do it. I mean, those are the best podcasts out there, are the ones that are consistent, and they only are consistent because they've utilized good people to help them. I know from
there's two things that make people stop listening to podcasts. Number one is inconsistency, and number two is bad audio quality. So you've got, I will say you have good audio quality. What's your gear setup?
My gear is Audio Technica, the ATR 2100.
Okay, good.
And it's USB right into my MacBook Pro. That's it.
Okay, that's cool.
The eCam recorder through Skype. And it was funny because when I was looking at a microphone and I was going back and forth between, I could get a $300 Blue Veti, or I can't remember what it's called. There's all this range of microphone. And there was a podcaster who I think actually John Dumas was interviewing him at the time, and John said, this was a long time ago, John said, man, what microphone are you using? Your audio is amazing. And he said, believe it or not, it's a $35 microphone called the Audio Technica 2100. And you betcha I went right onto Amazon and ordered that sucker right then and there. Now I think last time I looked, they're charging $70 for it now, but I got this thing for $34.95.
Nice. It's good. Mine's only $119, so I'm with you. Except I believe I'm a hardware believer. I don't believe in the software. I go all hardware.
Well, and I have it has a DLR option, where I could hook it into a separate mic board or setup, which I may eventually go to. But so far, I've just hooked it right up to the MacBook Pro, and it seems to work pretty well.
Yeah, I like the XLR setup because, and not only just for me, but most of the people I interview they don't have professional setups. So when I have a mixer and I can actually bring their level up and I can control their treble and their bass and their mid range and actually bring their audio quality up if they're not on a professional setup, it's great.
Yeah, that's the big difference, because obviously you can't control how somebody else sounds, right?
Yeah, and that requires post production, which I don't do. I don't edit my shows.
Man, we're the same in that regard. I don't. First of all, I don't have the time. Second of all,
I produce all of them. I edit all of them, but I don't do anything in between. I don't because I have ads and stuff I put in mine, and I have little jingles and stuff, but I don't when I start the recorder and I stop it, I don't do anything in between.
Yeah, I'm the same way, and that's why some people ask about that. If we mess up, can we stop and start over? And I said, no, it's just a conversation. There's no right or wrong.
Exactly.
we're just talking.
Yes.
Well, so tell me I know before you work with someone, and you've talked about a couple of books that obviously have influenced you. I always thought it was fascinating. You require that whoever it is read certain books. I think you have your list of I think it's 6 books. Can you talk about that? I think that's interesting, and what books they are, and why you require that before you'll work with somebody.
Yeah, my first foray into that concept was in 2010 when Crush It came out. Because I was doing a lot of social media consulting at the time, and I kept finding that I would walk into these meetings and I would have to explain overarching concepts of social media to these people that were very clearly and more succinctly explained in the book Crush It. So I just said, hey guys, and I would bring them a book. I said, would you mind before the next meeting just reading this? And we would meet the next, and it would make everything better because they were like, oh, I totally get what you're saying now. So I have this on my show. I have these books called The Sexy Six. And so my audience is generally people that have sort of found themselves to be unemployable, but they have a lot of fear around what to do next. They don't really know what to do after that. They just know they don't want to be doing what they're doing now. And I bring people on my show that have gone through that process and then achieved a lot of success. So we talk about that time in between when they became unemployable to what they did to become successful. And through these sort of casual conversations, all of these nuggets fall to the floor that people can take. And I'd like to do what you do, which is I just structure a very loose conversation. I have a couple of beats that I like to hit with each person, so I have a little bit of a flow. But generally, I follow the phraseology of Bill Cosby that he said to Billy Crystal, which was never let him see you work. So I like that. I do have an agenda sometimes for the conversations, but rarely does anybody realize that I'm going through that agenda. So, excuse my quick throat clearing. But what I found was if people want to go and they want to start changing their lives, these books that I've put together, when read in this order, they can open up the same exact front door they've had for many, many years, but their entire landscape will look differently when they read these books. And that is a very important kind of piece to, it's enough of a carrot, enough of a nugget to follow that people will stay inspired and go through the hard part of starting their own sort of online business or solopreneurship, if you will. So the books in this order are, number 1 is Rich Dad, Poor Dad by Robert Kiyosaki. And that basically lays out the foundation. That's the vocabulary of how to think about money. And then his second book, which was called The Cash Flow Quadrant, is the second book in the Sexy Six. So if you got the vocabulary, this one starts getting you thinking into sentences for finance. The third one is The 4-Hour Work Week by Tim Ferriss. We talked about that. All about efficiency, all about options, all about how to start working smarter, not harder. The fourth one, which was my most important, this is the book that to me, I could interview 500 millionaires in one room, and I could say, what's been the number one book that's influenced you the most? And this would be, they would raise their hands the highest, which was your friend and mine, Michael Gerber, with The E-Myth Revisited. And to me, that really was my major game changer. And then the fifth book is a book by Tom Rath. And when people don't quite understand what they're great at and what they should really be focusing on, this book will find it for them. It's called Strengths Finder 2.0 by Tom Rath. And really, it's the only one of the 6 that you have to buy brand new, and you have to buy the hard copy. You can't do an audiobook version. You can do the other 5. And you have to buy it brand new because it contains a code that you put online. The book is basically a summary of an online test that you have to take. So you take the test, then the book tells you what the test means, basically. And then book number 6 is Crush It by Gary Vaynerchuk, especially if you're going to be doing anything online. And again, you read those 6 books in that order, and I kid you not, your life will be different. You will and they're not foo-foo. They're not like self-help books. They're all very practical and very action-oriented. Rubber meets the road. How do I become successful in this world?
Well, and they all cover different things, which are all part of the package, right? That you're trying.
Yeah, that's what I mean. You go through those, and you will have gone through the 8 steps to becoming a successful solopreneur.
Why do you think it is? And I agree with you. I mean, every time, I just had this happen yesterday. I met with a very successful entrepreneur here in town, and we were just chatting, and I had actually reached out to him to come onto my podcast, and he wanted to meet first and chit chat, and we're talking. And of course, the E-Myth Revisited came up. And he, like everyone else, just like in your experience, I said, what's your favorite book? He goes, oh, by far, E-Myth Revisited. He's like, I've read it 7 times. If you looked at the book copy I have, it's highlighted every which way. I've got notes everywhere in it. It's amazing to me, and it's just kind of fascinating to me. I'm always curious. I mean, why that book is separated, from everyone else. I mean, what I love about it is the simplicity and the storytelling aspect, where it's really, okay, we're walking through this person's business, right? We're walking through Sarah and the pie shop, so you can like relate to that. And then, of course, the second part of what I love is the franchise model of it. I'm curious, what was your take from it? What did you love about that book the most?
Well, for me, it caught me at a time when I was at a big crossroads in my life. I just come back from Europe. I had spread my parents' ashes there for 4 months. I had literally $14 to my name at the time when I read it, and weirdly, I was fine. Like I was like, all right, I got this. I got to start. All I knew is that I never wanted to do client service work again. So I knew what I didn't want to do, which was helpful. I didn't know what I wanted to do. And for me, I loved the storytelling aspect. That was great. But for me, I remember right where I was. I was sitting in City Park in Denver when I read it. And for whatever reason, I'd had friends for years in the business. But for me, I read that book and said, oh, this is network marketing. This what he's talking about is the exact model that all the network marketing companies want someone to realize that they are. Each person is a franchise. And once I made sense of that, I was like, oh, I should just find a network marketing company to do, because I don't have any money and they build the whole business for me. And they have all the structure. And so if I realize that I'm one franchisee and I just help other people become franchisees, then that's what I'll do. And I did. I sent an email right after that to somebody, and it's ultimately what triggered me down this road that I'm on now, was just kind of that realization.
That's fascinating, because I obviously thought about that component of it when I was reading it, but I'd never thought of it to the extent that you did. I got hooked, and it's just kind of a interesting study in the psychology of different people and how they're driven and what motivates them. But I just got really hooked on the systems, the process, the franchise element of it, not from the perspective of just franchising, but from the broader perspective of, no matter if you buy a franchise business, if you start a business that you then franchise, or if you run a business that's never going to be franchised, the bottom line is you are going to be more successful if you have systems and operations and efficiencies in place. In fact, you have to have those in place.
I was going to say that there's the coolest thing about that book to me was that everyone becomes a franchise, no matter what their company is, what their business is, or how big it is. If you can start thinking of yourself, a solopreneur is a franchise. That is what a solopreneur is. So if you can start thinking about that, and then start thinking, okay, if I'm this business, and that's what happens, is that we represent ourselves on Facebook and on social media as ourselves. People's personal Facebook pages do 20 million% more business than their business pages do. Why? Because it's them. They are that person. They are that franchise. So once people kind of buy into your brand as a person, which is what they would need to do as a franchise, your sales go up. I mean, again, this is my world. I'm a solopreneur, so that's why I think of it. But it's no different than someone who has to open up a business and create systems within that business to make sandwiches the same every single time, do payroll the same every single time, train their people the same every single time. So as we work in our individual businesses, if I can create like screen flow videos to show how I edit my podcast or how I do my Twitter strategy or whatever I do, that's me doing what a franchise would do. I'm laying out the groundwork just like a franchise would. So it's just a mindset to me.
Yeah, and it helps, I think, a lot of people get rid of fluff, because the idea is even if you're not going to replicate your model, you need to think in a way that, how can I replicate this 5,000 times over? Well,
right.
So you start running things through that model, and boy, you get rid of a lot of stuff quickly because you go, well, I can't do that. There's no way I could do that. That would be ridiculous to try to do and repeat. And that's what I loved about it. It's just so... it's great. I could talk about that for a long time. But, I want to talk before we end, because we've been talking for 35 minutes now. It's been just flown by. But I want to ask you, because I think it's such an important part in what you do in working with people who are at that point where they've decided, okay, I'm no longer employable. Now what? Passion plays such a big part in that. I mean, today everybody loves to talk about passion. I love to talk about passion. And I think in an ideal world, we would all know our exact passion and then form a viable business around it. But that just so often doesn't even seem realistic. And I'm just kind of curious your thoughts on that. I mean, do you think people should follow their passions down the entire rabbit hole, or maybe follow sort of a direction that's made up of, okay, here's what I've sort of done, here's my experiences, here's what maybe I'm good at, and then find their passion along the way? I'm just kind of curious what your experience is with working different people, or what you think is the right way to go, because you hear it all the time. You hear people go, oh, I'm just not passionate about what I do. Okay, well, what are you passionate about? And a lot of times they don't know.
Right. I think that passion has to have a key part. Again, the only way I frame this is as if you're going to start a business, whether it's yourself or you're going to start a franchise of some sort, you literally can't do it. Well, I shouldn't say do it. You can't sustain it if you don't have a passion for the subject matter at hand. You can't just start a dry cleaning business if you're not into that. Or if your passion is not to, if you've got this, if your main goal is because you want to go surfing 4 days a week, that means, and you'll take whatever business you can to work for 3 days a week so you can go surf the other 4 days a week, then that's one thing. But if you want to start your own thing, passion, I believe, has to have a real key element in it. And but to your point, my belief is that everything you've been doing up until this point has trained you for whatever your business is going to be. So if you have a PhD from Harvard in psychology, but you want to become a magazine author or whatever, that's okay, because that some of what you've done at Harvard will have prepared you for that. We have episodes on the Solopreneur Hour called Find Your Swing, where people write in and they tell us what their background is, like what their education was and what their skills were, and then what their passion is. And we get to help them live create an online business based on what they already know how to do. And I think anybody can do that. Someone's making $1 million this year from teaching people to use Excel spreadsheets. I guarantee it. So there's a niche for everybody. And I think the people that are most successful in those niches are very passionate about their subject matter. And the way I frame it to them is, what could you talk to me about right now that you could bore me off my stool because you know so much about it? That's the thing.
I love that. I mean, your example on the Excel spreadsheet is so funny because one of my closest friends is a CPA, and he's been the CFO of a company for 15 years now, a small business, done really well. And, I've talked to him a lot, and he's talked to me a lot about, online business and some of the stuff I'm doing and some of the stuff with the podcast. And I've always told him, he's always said, man, I wish I had sort of something I could do that on. Well, just tell me, what are you really, really great at? It was so funny. He said, I'm a kick-ass Excel spreadsheet maker.
Huh.
And I said, really? I said, I'd pay for that. I hate Excel.
Yeah.
I don't want to create anything in Excel. And so
10 everyday uses for Excel that I bet you didn't know. That leads people into a sales funnel, which takes them to his webinar, which then he sells a course for $147 on how to be a super Excel ninja. And he makes $20,000 a month by running $1,200 of Facebook ads. Next.
Yeah, exactly. And that's all started from a passion. He got good at that in part because it was part of the job, but he just really enjoys it too. And so I think that's part of it. It's just kind of interesting because, I recently heard Mark Cuban talk about, and he's a big believer. He just poo-poos passion from the perspective. He goes, I just think that's a bunch of hogwash. He goes, find something you're good at. And then when you become excellent at it and you can see how it's becoming a viable business, then you'll find your passion through it.
Yeah, I don't know. Obviously he's very successful, but there's also a whole universe of business, especially online business, that I don't believe that he's been exposed to. Our little group of people, people like John making $150,000 a month with a podcasting tutorial, that's stuff that most traditional business people aren't aware of.
Yeah, no, I think that's right. It's just kind of fascinating. But the before we go, I definitely want to ask you and see if you want to talk about it all. Your Solo Lab. I'd like to give you a chance to talk about your Solo Lab group and sort of what that entails and how people can learn more about that.
Yeah, it's part of the process of, actually I shouldn't say the process. Part of growing, you grow a podcast, and all of a sudden, especially if it's in the entrepreneurial space, like ours are, people start writing you a lot of questions. It just happens. You start getting some downloads. I think I'm going to have probably over 80,000 downloads this month. So there's a lot of people listening all of a sudden. And I can't even tell you the questions. I'm inundated with questions all the time, meaning that the marketplace has shown me that there's a lot of people that want my particular brand of expertise. And that's not everybody's, because a million different people have coachings and trainings. But what happens is, especially when you have a podcast, people listen to you regularly and they like your voice, not your physical voice, but they like what you're saying and the perspective you're saying it from. And they want to find out more, or they want to learn from you. So when that happened to me, I decided to create, whenever I'm working on something, like right now I'm working on a lot of different Twitter strategies. So I always say I'm in the lab. Like, I'm kind of working on this thing. I'm in the lab working on it. So I created this group mastermind called Solo Lab. And it's not expensive. It's $300 per quarter that people can join. It's $297 per quarter. I'm going to be raising the prices soon because it's starting to get busy in there. And I do weekly Google Hangouts, at least one. I'm doing 2 today. I did one right before this call. I'm doing another one at 6 o'clock tonight with them. And that allows them to get on and share what they're working on in a group environment. And we all get to sort of put them on the hot seat and talk to them. We have a really, really busy, super engaged Facebook group where people can work through their different logo ideas and business ideas and taglines, and they post their podcasts, and we get to go in and listen to them and review them. And it's just this really great learning environment. And more importantly, it's a really great action environment. It's full of people that want to be there. They're actively growing their business. And so now you're doing one of those first rules, which is surrounding yourself with the 5 people, that are, you're going to become the sum of the 5 people you spend the most time with. So they're all spending time in Solo Lab and getting like all of this input from these successful, or to be successful, certainly successful thinking, motivated people. And I did that with first the idea that I just wanted to give them a place to go, but now it's really a very viable business for me. It's a great way to make passive income. Oh, I didn't mention, I also give each SoloLab member 2 30-minute phone calls, which I started off as like a little bonus and then started enjoying it so much that I just included it as part of the membership now. So it does make my Mondays and Fridays very busy because I have private coaching clients as well. So I basically give them $500 of coaching calls. That's what I charge for. I charge $500 a month for coaching calls. And then they get all of this access, and then all access to all my digital products. So I have a social media training, and then I have a new advanced podcasting course coming out. So that's what SoloLab is in a big giant nutshell. And man, it's one of the most fun parts of my business. It's getting to talk and hang out with all these people that are motivated.
Oh, I love that. I mean, it sounds awesome. I mean, for those listening who've never participated in a mastermind or a membership group, I think the one thing that surprised me more than anything that kind of seems like common sense right now, but I didn't really think of at the time, was that, the biggest value of these membership groups is the community aspect of it, is just being able to dive in there. Yeah, it's the biggest value by far, right? I mean, it's you get to know these people. You get to you're basically hanging out with people who have the same exact struggles and thoughts, even though they're in totally different businesses.
It feels like a family now. It really does to us.
Yeah, no, that's huge. What is one thing, there's got to be, you get all these people writing to you and emailing you and contacting you. Has there been anything where somebody has said, hey, can you help me with this? Which is sort of like, I never actually thought about that. Where they're sort of telling you, okay, here's what I want.
There's been a million. Our Find Your Swing. By the way, can I give the link for SoloLab?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay? It's just iwantsololab.com.
Perfect.
So easy enough. I want SoloLab. On our Find Your Swing episodes, that happens 3 or 4 times an episode. So, my little funny anecdote for that is we had a guy that was a classical guitarist. Well, here's what's happening. People write in. They go to the website and they write their little Find Your Swing question. Like, here's what I do, and here's what I want to do, and here's what my passion is. What do I do? And sometimes they're very wordy. So we've got to, we never read them ahead of time, and we do them live on the show. So it's like, we never know what we're getting into, but that's what's fun. Just like we said at the beginning of this call. And so we had this, I didn't realize it, but I had pasted 2 music related questions in a row, and I hadn't seen the first one. I only saw the second one. So I thought we only had 1 music question. And my co-host for the day, Dawn, was reading this question. I was reading another question because it was really long, and I was trying to figure out what to extract from it so that I didn't have to read this entire novella that this person had written. But at the end of what she said, I heard her say that this person was working on a lullaby CD for kids to put kids to sleep. And the only musical related email that I had seen was from a trombone player. And I was like, wait, this trombone players want us to do a lullaby album? Just like honk, honk, honk. I was like I just see the kid falling asleep and then honk. And it was the hardest I've laughed on the show ever because it just got me. The visual of this little kid falling asleep and a trombone player going honk in the background just totally destroyed me. And we laughed. So it was actually the first and only time I've ever had to edit time out of the show because we were quietly sobbing with laughter for about 3 minutes because it just it was perfect. So that was, but the question before that, which was really kind of difficult, which this person was this classic guitar player, and we kind of, oh God, I don't know what to do with that. But then it's weird how when you start talking through processes out loud, which is theoretically what you do in a mastermind, things just manifest. They just go, oh, actually, that's a really good idea. Let's do this. And then all of a sudden there's a business at the other end of it. So that's, I think, I don't know, without totally answering your question, that's how I answer your question.
No, I mean, it's great. It happens. It is amazing when you can bounce things off people and the things that you can take away from that. I mean, a lot of the legal work, that I do with clients as I start working with them, it becomes legal/consulting because now you're just sort of a trusted advisor that when they have questions or when they want to think through things, you're giving them a different perspective. and something they said obviously made you think about something different, but equally something you say makes them think about things differently as well, or puts it into a better frame, which is the whole point, right?
Yeah, ideally. That's how that's supposed to work.
Well, listen, I feel like we could talk for a while longer, but I'm going to let you go now at the 50-minute mark. I really appreciate your time. I really appreciate you letting me pry and dive into your experiences and ask the one question that I know you hated the most. So I sort of did that by design, but I really glad you were a good sport with it. And is there anything that you'd like to leave anybody with? You want to leave anybody with your email or the best way to get a hold of you? I know you gave the Solo Lab information, but anything else?
I just would love if you check out the show when you're not listening to this one at solohour.com.
Sounds fantastic. Thanks again for your time. I appreciate it, Michael.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks for being with us today on the Franchise Euphoria podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, please be sure to go to iTunes and provide a review. Also, please remember that although Josh Brown is a licensed and practicing attorney, nothing contained in this podcast should be construed as legal advice, because it is not. The information contained in this podcast is general and educational in nature, and none of it should be relied upon as legal advice. That being said, if you have questions for Josh and would like to contact him, please email him at josh@franchiseeuphoria.com. Thank you so much for listening, and we hope you tune in to our next weekly episode.